Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place.
Hi there.
Hey.
Hi, Jolie. So I hear you talking in the year of opening a lot about hinge skills.
I do
And
talk about hinge
I
skills.
definitely want to hear what you have to say about hinge skills because I'm learning, but I'm here to support people who find it hard because I find it really hard.
So the whole concept, for me, the whole concept of hinge skills comes out of having been in a triad with you where you were the hinge. Years later, I looked back, had heard the phrase hinge, the word hinge, and I was like, oh.
Is there a list of doorstop skills? Because I think I might have been a doorstop. Okay, hinge skills.
Yeah.
What are they?
So maybe we need to define what a hinge is first.
Okay, sure. Let's talk about a hinge.
And it's a metaphor. A hinge is a metaphor. It is not, I'm not literally talking about a hinge. A hinge is any person who is the pivot point between multiple partners.
All right. So if I'm in a
anytime
relationship with you and someone else, but the two of you aren't or are in a different kind of relationship, then I need to manage
Exactly.
my side of
So
that.
you might think about it as the intensity of my connection to two various people is more intense than their connection to each other.
I
So
like that. Good.
They are
Thank you.
metamours, and they may have no connection to each other other than through me, or they may have quite a bit of contact, but still I am their more influential or pivotal relationship. And this can occur in any multi-person relational configuration. It's not just about the V, but it is helpful to use the image of
V
a
being
V
the
with the
hinge at the
hinges at that.
bottom and the two metamours are at the
Not all hinges are bottoms.
in a V. The point is at the bottom, but you're right about that. It might be like a less than sign or a greater than sign. Yeah.
I think that, sorry, I
You're
can't
funny.
help it. I can't
You're
help it.
great.
I think that
You should hear the outtakes from this podcast.
it's getting a little silly. I don't do stand up.
It's not true.
So if we have the hinge and then we think about what are the skills someone needs in order to be in that place of having multiple relationships simultaneously that may have different agreements, different, if nothing else, they are different people, different needs, different wants, different purposes to those relationships. The hinge skills for me it's an enormous list of ways that I can get clear on where I am thriving, where I'm struggling, where I'm just getting by in my relationships. And it is very particularly about how I manage myself. Because if you think about a hinge, this is why I like the metaphor of a hinge. I know other people use other metaphors, but for me, I think about the hinge that, like when I look at a door hinge, the hinge has a pin that drops in. And so there are these two pieces, the door and the wall, and the hinge has a pin that drops in. And the pin needs to be stable and well lubricated.
That's important.
And the hinge pin needs to be stable, and
Otherwise it's going to make a lot of noise.
Oh, it is. And if it's bent out of shape,
Bent out of shape, more trouble.
more trouble. So there are other metaphors, but I do enjoy the hinge
I
metaphor.
like it too. All right, so the hinge.
The hinge skills are
it's a relationship. It's a relational position that someone can hold among multiple other people.
Right.
But
and the skills are a list of skills that are just relational skills, but they hold particular value in the position of hinge when you're in the position of hinge, because they are the skills that make this all work better.
Right. There are no hinge skills that are unique to being in the hinge position. It's just that they are skills whose value is increased a lot in the hinge position.
And they're ones that if they're missing, so if somebody comes to me and they have multiple relationships and they are like deeply in the struggle bucket, they're just in it. If we go through this list, universally we find where their weak spots are
Mhm.
is where the squeakiness is happening in the relationship.
And just to make it clear, we're not going to talk about all of them in this episode
No,
because
we can't.
there's a lot. There's just too
Yeah,
much.
the list that I teach from has 14, um, and that's not even a complete list, and that's like an outline that's broken down, and each point has
Has multiple
multiple.
pieces. So we might be able to like say the whole list in one episode, but let's talk about some of the
Well, let's talk about the core of it,
okay,
because there is a core.
what's the core?
The core is responsibility.
Ah, no wonder I'm no
Like a
good at it.
Spider-Man. Oh, you've got better.
But
Favorite.
that what I completely agree with responsibility being the core because I see now looking back at our triad the way the multitude of ways that my lack of taking responsibility caused wow, so much
And
of the
this that
trouble.
was a particularly good um microcosm to look at, because in that triad we all lived together, we were working on owning property and businesses together, we had so many overlaps that when I look back at it, I think about all the ways that I learned how to do things poorly because we just didn't know, we didn't have the language.
Yep.
But right at the center of all of it is responsibility. And you said, oh, that's why I'm bad at it. And I know that you acknowledge to me all the time that this is something that you're working on constantly now. But if I go back to 2009 and I think about who you were,
Yeah.
there are things all of us struggle with.
Mhm.
And that was something that you struggled with. And one of the ways that I watched you struggle with it is that you didn't want to admit that you struggled with responsibility.
Oh,
So
yeah, I haven't thought about that in a while. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
decade plus before you were like, oh, I struggle to take responsibility.
Yeah, I just kept trying to gloss over that flaw in that weakness in my relational capabilities.
A weakness, not something that you never did, not something that you always failed at,
And
just.
it wasn't outside my capacity. It's just something that I hadn't done the work to get better at.
And so right at the core of
So
responsibility would
responsibility.
be, can you take responsibility for the fact that you have responsibility? I I mean, hinging isn't just about taking responsibility, but at the center of all of it will be the idea that if I am going to be in relationship to anyone, there will be effort that I need to expend in those relationships. That doesn't have to be like hard work
Right.
even.
Just effort. Yeah.
It's just
Just
effort. It's the effort of relating to others. And one of the ways I see people escape that effort is in trying to escape the responsibility, place the responsibility
yeah.
somewhere else. And
Yep.
unfortunately, being in multiple relationships, uh, some people, when they're in multiple relationships, find that they have an escape hatch at any
Yep.
point in their responsibility taking. So let's say they're focusing on being in right relation to each of their partners, right? But if they have multiple partners, then one of the ways they can escape their own need to take responsibility for their decisions, for their time management, for their effort, for their repairs, for their communication is to just turn their attention to the other relationship.
Aha. Okay.
So I might feel like I'm taking a lot of responsibility because if I look across the breadth of all of my relational connections, it feels like a lot. I'm like, look at all that I'm doing.
But if you focus in on any one,
If you notice that you have a tendency to, when things get tough, just sort of, yeah, ditch and escape to, even just in your mind, escape to the problems of a different relationship, that's a sign to me that you're struggling with taking responsibility for the fact that these are your relationships and that you have decisions to make and that you have choice in those relationships. And with all that choice, I mean, choice is a burden.
choice is a burden. And I was thinking about what you were just saying about you. So here I am. I'm in a particular situation with you in my relationship. And also, I have another relationship where maybe there's a different
Mhm.
situation going on. And honestly, I do what I'm about to describe, I do in my work job all the time. Instead of solving the problem in front of me, I solve the problem I want to solve, the one I feel
Ooh,
confident at, the one I feel like, yeah, I got that. And so I'll turn my attention away from the one I don't want to solve to the one that I do want to solve.
way to own your stuff.
And that is not going to always work because the one you want to solve might not be the highest priority one right now.
Right.
And so taking responsibility includes
Prioritizing your problems and
prioritizing your
issues
problems. And
and
relationships
efforts.
aren't about problems, aren't all about problems. You know, it may not be a problem. It may just be a, well, what are we going to do about this? I don't want to think about that right now. So I'm going to think about that instead.
Yeah.
But I'm right here.
I
Oh,
do that in my writing
yeah,
all the
you
time.
do
Oh my
sometimes,
gosh.
don't you? You're
Oh my
like, I don't want
gosh.
to write that
I
right
don't
now. I'm
want to
going to
write
write
that.
this other
I
thing.
just keep writing the other thing. Like,
Yeah.
okay, but the research paper's not going to write itself.
Hmm.
And so I love that you just called yourself out on that because for me, watching you learn to take responsibility, not just in our intimate relationship, but in all of your relationships, including your relationships with our children,
Hmm.
watching you lean in and decide, oh, I have I have a choice all the time.
Yeah.
That has been one of the ways I've fallen in love with you over and over and over again is watching you step into how hard it is to prioritize, to acknowledge that you have choice, to stay present to the fact that these choices aren't always easy, but that you have them and that they're a burden and a gift. I feel this welling up of care for you and affection.
Well, thanks.
And the hardest one for me to watch you struggle with is your time management.
Uh,
I wanna
and
call out time management
yeah,
in
time management. Uh-huh.
responsibility taking
It's key. It's so
special,
important. Yeah.
right? Because when we're talking about multiple relationships, the one thing that as far as I know, how I know how to work with time, I only have a finite amount of it. If you have some other option, go for it, but
As far as I
as
know,
far
that's
as I'm
true as well.
aware.
In fact, that is the thing that sort of defines being in my philosophy, this incarnated, not incorporated, incarnated human being in time versus being like the divine universe that we're all part of.
Which you are a divine being, and
And
you chose to be incarnated right
and
now,
and
so here you
it's
are,
this is bounded by time.
experiencing finitude,
Yeah.
experiencing entropy.
Yeah.
And so taking responsibility for your time management, whether that is something that's easy for you or difficult for you, is just part of the picture. And being able to do that, people who are able to use the tools that they need to, use the support systems that they need to manage their time well, tend to do better at hinging. So if you struggle with this, this is a place where you need to ask for support,
Yeah.
not
Yes.
from
Mhm.
the same partner over and over and over again, because
That's
that's what
important.
often
Yeah,
happens is
because that's
we
that can
lean
turn
in.
into an imbalance that can create resentment, and you got other problems.
Exactly.
And I don't know if this is where you were wanting to go right now. We can come back to it if you want to, but I know for a fact that the biggest influence on me that makes time management hard is difficulty in setting boundaries. It's about boundary setting for me.
Right. Well, so responsibility taking and then, yeah, being present to the fact that I have choice. I have decisions to make. They're mine to make. Choosing not to make a decision
It's
is
still
choosing
a
to make
choice.
a decision. And all of that will boil down to can I identify my boundaries? Are they grounded in my actual values? And then can I hold them in the face of
Whoa.
different people's wants
Yep.
and needs and
Yeah.
desires? And that is at the core, that is what differentiation is, right? So like we could take this a level further and say, you'll also be practicing healthy psychological differentiation if you practice holding your boundaries,
Yep.
because holding, it's one thing to say, I have a boundary that I set the boundary.
Yep.
It's another thing altogether to say, I have these two people who I care about, and they both want something from me right now. They both want my life to be a certain way so that their
Right.
life will be a certain way. If I don't know what my boundaries are,
Yeah.
it is highly likely that I will be yanked around or I will feel yanked
Feel
around
yanked around.
by the
Right.
context switching of this partner to that partner.
And
But
it,
those but that is me having, again, to come back to be the
yep.
hinge pin. Like, I need to know who I am and how I'm making my decisions. And so when I'm in these different relational contexts, I actually know how to stand by the decisions that I've made
Yeah.
as mine,
Right. So there was you need to know your boundaries. That's helpful. Then you have to hold them, what you were just saying.
which is not
You have to
simple for
choose
a
to
lot of
hold them.
us.
And I just had an epiphany about myself because I think about myself a lot. I love that. But if I set my boundaries based on values that I have investigated and thought about, and then those are easier for me to hold than the ones that I set. And I set a lot of them based on my feeling. I have a particular feeling that I want to have, and I set a boundary based on that. And then the context I'm in changes, my feelings change, the boundary doesn't feel right anymore. So
So less
holding
stable.
it is harder because I look at it and like, well, that doesn't feel like a valuable boundary now.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. I think we should stay with it. I know that this episode could so
Oh,
there
we
will
could,
be a whole series of Hinge skill
yeah.
episodes because there are others.
So today we're definitely talking about responsibilities and
Responsibility and
boundaries,
boundaries. And the what I heard you just say is if you draw your boundaries based on your emotional status in the moment,
yeah, right.
so your feelings,
Hmm.
then when your feelings change, those boundaries may be hard to hold. They may also be utterly irrelevant and even sound silly to you,
Yes.
like backwards,
Hmm.
wrong. Why did I ever draw that boundary? And I find that for myself, when I find myself in that spot, I project that onto other people because that's uncomfortable. It's
It is,
really
right.
uncomfortable to think,
Yeah.
why, like I set this boundary. What the hell is wrong with me that I want this other thing? It is so much easier to say, it must be you.
But yep,
I'm coming
clearly.
to you.
I
It must be
mean,
you. It's just so much easier. So projection is one of the ways that we can fall into the habit of thinking our boundary issues are largely somebody else's problem.
which can immediately create again resentment because I'm like, okay, I have this boundary, but now because of something you did, I have to change it. Now, there are many things wrong with that sentence, but it still comes up. And one of the things is I have to change it. I get to choose. We're back to the choice and responsibility thing, but
Yeah, I mean,
yikes.
what's your bottom line for a relationship? Like uh,
Yeah.
we get to have boundaries that are just our bottom line. Our Dan Savage calls it the price of admission. I've heard other creators talk about it as your cover charge. Like, what is it that you require to be in a relationship with you in order to be in relationship with you? And you get to have that. But, um, if ugh, this seems to come back to a sense of like, where do you find your selfhood?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like if my selfhood is a reflected sense of selfhood, if I get my self esteem and my sense of who I
Oh,
am from what you think of me and how you interact with me, now I'm screwed.
yeah.
If you change, I feel like I have to change because I don't have my own light
Which
source.
can be very scary for you if I change. Your foundation is me. Now your foundation changed.
Right.
Yikes.
So the idea of understanding your boundaries, I think we have been talking about boundaries so much culturally recently that I think most of us think like, okay, good, I got it. Boundaries. I need to have boundaries. But I mean, I continually find that the place I have to come back to is, am I clear on what my boundaries are for how I will hold myself in integrity in my relationships? And that's not just my relationships with people, in my relationship to my work, in my relationship to my vices, like
Yeah.
how am I going to hold myself and really feel like I am the one making the decisions that make up my life
Right.
versus my life is happening to me.
Ah, that old chestnut.
So the next hinge skill. So now we've talked about responsibility taking, um, boundaries and an awareness of boundaries and an ability to set and hold our boundaries and to maintain them in the face of different partners, different life circumstances happening. Which doesn't mean you can never reevaluate them. But if you're reevaluating your boundaries on a moment to moment, day
Mhm.
to day basis, I'm suspicious that you're not actually clear on what your boundaries are and you are being instead reactive to what other people's boundaries are. But the third
Hey, I'm
thing,
right here.
were you personally attacked? I think the third thing that we could talk about in this particular episode, and then we'll come back and do the other 10
Yeah.
items, would be distress tolerance.
Ooh, okay.
So if
Oh,
you're
that, wow, there's so much there.
when you're a hinge, when you're in the hinge position, and the thing is, anybody in any kind of life at all, like as soon as you get here, we are all learning to manage our distress. And some of us are supported really well as children in learning to manage our distress, and some of us are not supported at all. And some of us are provided caregivers who actively cause us distress and do not give us any tools to learn to tolerate it other than shutting down, dissociating, or otherwise physically damaging ourselves. So I I can't state strongly enough that distress tolerance is not about multiple relationships or even being a hinge. However, again, when you're in the hinge position, you're going to have the opportunity over and over again to be managing multiplicity, to be present to the fact that multiple different opinions can be had, multiple different needs may come up. You may feel yourself actually wanting two things that are mutually exclusive. They like cannot happen at the same time. I cannot be in two places at the same time, for instance. And being able to manage that distress and not make that the problem of the people I'm relating to, which doesn't mean I can't ask for support, but simply being able to manage the discomfort of, oh, I am feeling this. I am feeling the the distress that comes with knowing that these different people want different things. And yet I'm going to calm my nervous system. I'm going to um, use my communication tools to make sure that I am being clear about where my edges are and like what I can manage right now. I'm going to do some checking in on what my capacity is to manage things. And I'm going to allow myself to escalate or de escalate relationships based on my capacity to handle complexity.
That makes sense.
It is, let me put that more simply. It's okay to say, you know, I can't be a good partner to you right now. I don't have the capacity to do that. So rather than overpromise and underdeliver, I'm going to make the mature decision to shift this relationship to actually fit in my life. And then you get to decide whether you want to meet me there and
And
renegotiate and have a new form of relationship.
it's I what you're saying makes 100% sense, and I'm holding it up against messages that I have from the culture and from my upbringing about the rejection that I might feel if you say, you know, I can't I don't see a way that I can be a good partner for you right now. And there's me going, "Oh no, that's awful." When what you're saying is, I see you. I know who you are. I understand our relationship, and I don't want
I
you to
care
get
about
less.
you.
I care about it. Is actually the opposite of rejection. It's an acknowledgement of the depth of our relationship to say, yeah, this isn't going to work right now because I don't have what you need based on what you've told me and based on my understanding of myself. That's amazing.
And if we step off the relationship escalator
Yeah.
and we stop thinking that relationships have to travel in one direction, always intensifying
Yeah,
and
that's good.
always heading toward one destination, then the possibilities are really endless for how we might reconfigure our
Right.
relationship.
Yep.
But it's hard to do that, and it's hard to imagine that. We tend to think of things as an on-off switch. So I've reconfigured two relationships this year, and in both circumstances, I was met with, "Well, how would we do that?" And I said, "Well, we just do it the
How
same
do
way we built the relationship to begin with.
how do we want to do
It's
that?
okay.
Yeah.
We get to redesign anytime we want, but we both have to manage then our distress over this is changing, and change causes discomfort. And
Right.
now I have to also, let's go back. I have to unfuck my mono mind again because getting off the relationship
Yep. That
escalator
requires
requires like
digging into all
something's
that for
wrong with this
yourself.
relationship.
Hmm.
It's bad. I'm bad. I failed. Doesn't matter as much. It might matter a ton, but not be the right fit right now.
Yep. And
And
that and you know, like I said, I might feel rejection. But if I dig deeper, I see, okay, it doesn't, it's far more than that. And it isn't a rejection. It's a blah, blah, blah. But I'm describing a situation where I'm feeling distressed, like, but I don't want the relationship to change. Okay, change can be distressing, but distress doesn't have to be a problem to solve. Distress is something, it might be something to just understand. You
And
figure out how you experience it and experience it.
right. And that's where, I mean, I think for me, my primary spiritual practice even right now is just holding my own feelings, just being with them and trying not to have a preference for them being different.
Yeah.
And literally waking up every morning this at this point, waking up, and when I wake up with that, like the shiver of a bad dream, just like laying there and deciding it's okay to just feel the discomfort of that, and I don't need it to be different. And I know this is being talked about. So my algorithm is feeding me all kinds of messages that say, that's good. Just be with it. Just be with it and
Mm.
see, because it will ease. And all of our major spiritual traditions have a version of this. All
Yep.
of the philosophical traditions have
Right.
a version of this. Jungian psychology has a version of this. The Dr. Hawkins book that we were reading,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
all of these, this idea that if I just be with the feeling without any need to change it, it will shift of
Yeah.
its own accord, because the energy stored behind it is what is causing the intensity of the distress, and the resistance causes it to ramp up. And that's different for me. I mean, I'm a big fan of expression as well. I do want to live a fully expressed
Yep.
life.
Yeah. There's emotional release to be done.
Yeah.
Um,
But I'm finding great power in managing some of my distress through quietly holding my child parts and my wholeness in all of its various messes
so
without
one
trying
of
to
the
fix it,
so one of the
because I'm a
techniques
fixer.
you use is leaning into the lens of multiplicity. Oh, yes, the distress is happening, and there are other things happening too.
Yeah.
And I can hold the distressed parts with parts that maybe aren't so distressed, and yeah, not problematizing the feeling
Yeah.
is one way of managing distress. Oh, this doesn't feel great, but there's nothing wrong.
Yeah. And sometimes the thing that we feel is wrong, it's like the only way it's wrong is that we are judging it as wrong,
Right. Yeah.
because it just is. It just is. This is just the fact of it. I can't go on this trip, or I have to do this thing. Uh, We can make a problem out of it, or we can decide to be with what is.
Yeah.
And I think that distress tolerance can be come at from a lot of different angles, but this one comes up for me a lot around hinging and the acts of being in healthy hinge skills. Because if I understand that I don't have to feel dragged around by my feelings and I can just be with them, I stand a better chance of holding myself in the face of all these waves that will come as different people want different things, and as my feelings about other people shift and change. And that can help me maintain a sense of stability within myself.
Ah.
And that's where I think this is all part of your individuation journey, anybody's individuation journey. Because if you choose to be in relationship in a way that facilitates you having the opportunity to be with these waves of feelings and to sit with the complexity of it, and not try to fix yourself, but just allow yourself
Just
to mature and be present to all the all the complexity of what is, you're going to find more access to your psychological wholeness.
So I have one more question about this, which is great. Yep, that all makes sense. So I'm experiencing this distress, and I've decided that the thing to do is to experience it and sit with it. And the discussion is about tolerating distress. What do I do when it feels intolerable?
Right. Well,
What are some of the strategies and tools you suggest in those times?
I'm glad that you brought this up, because before we decide to tolerate, we should all ask ourselves the question, am I tolerating distress or am I tolerating abuse?
Okay, that's a
They're not
very
this, like,
important
abuse is
distinction.
distressing. And I don't want people to be tolerating or learning to tolerate abuse. And so you may need help sorting that out. And if you're in a non-monogamous relationship, I would especially suggest that you may need help sorting that out from a therapist, a counselor, a coach, someone who is skilled at understanding that non-monogamy itself is not inherently the cause of, like, that is not inherently abusive. Yes, but also is not inherently the cause of the distress. I might be experiencing a lot of feelings and be non-monogamous, and those two things don't have to be causal to each other.
Right.
They don't even have to be correlated
Mm.
necessarily. But but if you don't know how to sort that out, please seek out extra support, third party support in understanding whether you are actually in an abusive situation that needs to be handled like an abusive situation, which doesn't have to demonize a partner, but does have to address the fact that you deserve to be treated with care and respect and not taken advantage of, coerced, manipulated, or physically harmed or emotionally harmed. But sometimes we are just really, we're in the shit. It just
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different things you can do. I think we each should have, ideally, we'd each have our own self care plan, right? My self
Okay.
care
All right.
plan
Good.
has on it three people who I can call when I'm distressed,
Mhm.
who won't blame my non-monogamy because we've already established that it's not an abusive situation. I'm just experiencing the discomfort. My self-care plan also includes neurosomatic intelligence drills. There are lots of resources for that. You can go back and listen to those. I think episodes 113 and 118. There's also we have a free training on neurosomatic intelligence for people in complex relationships.
Yeah.
You can find that on YouTube, and we
It's
can
a
put the link
video with just,
teaching you
demonstrations of some
the
things that you can do.
exactly. It's actual physical things you can do with your body. Um, your breath, though. I can't actually think of anything that's more readily accessible than to say, can you just come back to your breath and be present with your breath, your sense of I am here. I am here now. And not be in the future or in the past, which is also where we usually are when we're feeling distressed. We're not actually in the
Right.
present moment.
Yeah, I find it helpful to ground myself in the physical reality of where I am when the distress doesn't come from the physical environment in any way.
Right.
Well, then it's all from the past or the future.
Right. So if
Um,
I'm sitting in my office, I might do the simple grounding exercise of looking around and naming five things I can see. I can see that wall. I see my snake plant. I see my favorite Thomas More book. I see my stuffed foxy. Hi, Foxy. I see my phone. I see my crochet project. And then I can name four things I can touch. I can reach out and touch four things. I can name those. And then I can name three things I can hear,
so all
two
the
things I can smell, one thing I can taste, and get myself back here in the room by doing that. Um,
there are
these
tools, there are
these
things
are
that
all the
we can
tools of
do
being
to.
trauma informed for ourselves.
Mhm.
If you're experiencing distress, right, you'll probably need more of these tools. So there are a lot of them. We can link to some of them in the show notes.
Yeah.
So can we wrap up talking about hinge skills and saying how important it is to recognize that this is skill building?
Skill building, yeah, right.
Just because you're not good at something now
Yep.
doesn't mean you won't get good
You might
at
not
it.
come into the situation with all the skills you want. We hardly ever do.
And a lot of people open their relationships and um the metaphor I often use is they joyfully, gleefully go skydiving
Mhm.
and didn't realize that they needed a parachute. And so often I am in the position of strapping parachutes to people as they are falling.
And those parachutes are all those skills that are
Exactly.
absolutely buildable. They can be learned and practiced
And
before you hit the ground.
and I'm not, that doesn't make me disappointed in someone or upset with them. I recognize that I didn't have any of these skills at all. Like not at all. Every single thing that I write about, that I talk about, I did it all so badly and had to teach myself and go learn from other people and then make mistakes and figure this out and get better at it and better at it. And I'm learning all the time now. So we'll pick up and have another hinge skills
Sure.
episode. We
Yeah.
covered responsibility, boundaries, decision making, applying the lens of multiplicity we touched
We
on,
touched
though
on
there's
that. Yep.
more, and distress tolerance. There's so much more we can talk about here, but
Yeah,
if we
let's
start getting into this and understanding that this is the skill building of having multiple relationships, you can do that skill building in any context.
in any
Whether you have
context.
any current relationships or not, every single one of these skills can also be practiced in your workplace, in your family relationships, in your friendships, with your
With
pets, a lot of
whoever.
these,
Yeah,
for gosh sakes.
you really
I
can.
can I
Um,
could practice these skills and know that I am increasing my relational capacity
yeah. And
from wherever I am.
if you didn't notice listening to this, you can go back and listen to it. Each one of the things that we talked about is linked to all the others. So you
Yeah.
build any one skill and all of them improve.
Yeah.
And so it really builds pretty quickly on itself, or it can if you put your attention to it and
Well,
practice.
you started working on responsibility taking. I think you first noticed it, what was it, 6 years ago? We chose our
Yeah.
words and you
Oh yeah.
noticed it, and then you
I
just spent the whole year forgetting that
just
that was the chosen word.
did not pull that off. Did not nail it.
But the thing is, but you didn't nail it. But do any of us ever?
No, but I didn't need to.
You got
I
better.
brought my attention to it. I got better.
And I know that that's your
Did it
word
again.
again this year.
Hmm.
And the growth that I have witnessed over the last 10 months is just fucking astounding to me, because this isn't your first circumambulation
Right.
of the concept of, hey, I'm here taking responsibility for my life and building it the way I want. So it's wonderful to see for myself how we come back through these skills and work on them fresh,
Yeah.
and we gain a new layer of understanding and capacity.
It is wonderful. There's a lot of joy in the building of these skills.
Yummy. Okay, till the next Hinge Skills episode. There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliquiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com, and find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.